Sweet. You started to say humanity first.
Yeah, I always get that mixed up. All right, hello everyone. This is the Dividend Report. Thank you so much for joining along. Today I've got Rio Verdonero with me.
Say humanity first.
Yeah, hold on. I always get that mixed up. All right, hello everyone. This is the Dividend Report. Thank you so much for joining along. Always some tech issues after coming back.
We've got two sets in the room here, guys.
Yeah, we sure do. All right, I'm muting that. That won't be an issue anymore. I've got the chat open and up. If you guys have anything you want to say, be sure to leave it here in the YouTube channel. And we're going to get started with this episode of the Moving Forward podcast. How's it going?
All right, sounds good. Let me just hit record on my end here. Welcome to the Moving Forward podcast. Today we have Seth back for SCOTUS Talk. Say hi, Seth.
Hey, Rio. Thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming back. SCOTUS Talk, a.k.a. why a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court told Trump to fuck off twice. So I'm looking at this tweet right now. There are currently no unruled upon lawsuits brought by Trump or his allies in any court. The only cases remaining in court are appeals of Trump's previous losses. Unless they file new lawsuits, Trump and his allies will remain 1-59 in post-election litigation. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, I mean, the first thing to point out is that they had no merit to any of these arguments. I mean, the one case they won was a very minor issue having to do with a couple hundred ballots in a state that Biden won by tens of thousands. So I mean, it's truly brutal, especially since in the Supreme Court, 3 of the justices were appointed by Trump himself, and does have a 6-3 conservative majority. And many of the lower level judges who ruled on these cases were also appointed by Trump and still ruled against him. So it actually boggles the mind to think that after all that, Trump still continues to claim that it was a rigged election and that it's not legitimate, and his supporters continue to believe him. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely crazy. In order for that to be true, all of these judges appointed by Trump would have to be part of the deep state's conspiracy against Trump, right? I mean, Occam's razor would suggest he just lost, get over it.
Trump has constantly been saying that this is his legacy, that he's been filling all of these seats, and this is the greatest boon to the GOP that could ever be imagined. And now we're seeing all of a sudden it's all rigged, all of this nonsense, the followers that I'm seeing on social media immediately flipping with him and saying that, oh, well, Amy Coney Barrett is a deep state plant is... I don't quite have the words to describe the absolute insanity of what's going on here.
Well, it's like religion. It's what it is. Many people have compared it to a cult. It is a cult with a leader who is charismatic to some people, apparently. And in a religion, it's not about what's true. It's about what appeals to you emotionally, what you choose to believe about yourself and about the world for emotional reasons. Right? It's nothing to do with what's actually true. And so if you argue with somebody about religion, you'll notice the same thing. You disprove one thing they said and they'll just move the goalposts or redefine the terms or whatever, right? In order to maintain their belief. That's just what's going on there. It's that simple. What's amazing is that so many people buy into it. Apparently, depending on the poll you look at, for a while, it was something like 80% of Republicans believed that the election was stolen and that Joe Biden didn't really win. I think it's down to like 50% now. So that's progress. That's still a lot of people. 50%? Seriously?
It's a massive
But then again, I mean, that's probably about the percent of Republicans who never believed that Obama was an American citizen.
What's really hard to wrap my head around is,
or a natural born one in any case.
In the past, I've spent time trying to say, look at our military budget. Look, if you just took a slice of that out, you could actually feed the poor. You do anything of these more left-leaning ideas. And the common response I would get from any right-leaning individual is, we have to protect our country. We have to spend this money in the military. What happens? Trump says, oh, we're not going to sign this defense spending bill unless you agree not to change the name of these Confederate homage bases. And all of a sudden, all of his supporters say, yeah, down with the defense spending bill. We don't need that anyways. It's just the way that they are so willing to flip is, I mean, it's scary in one sense of the word. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to this. GOP coalition was made up of basically three parts. Traditionally, is the way they look at it. People with quote conservative economic policy, by which they mean neoliberal. People with a conservative foreign policy, by which they mean neoconservative, and then so-called social conservatives, who, in my opinion, have always, not all of them, many of them have always been more, I think it would be more apt to call them theocratic radicals. And that's because I use the word conservative to refer to somebody who wants to conserve parts of the status quo, right? And so wanting to conserve the social order would be conservative. And in that sense, it applies to me. But what they're wanting to do is to harken back to regress to a time before the Bill of Rights, when there was no separation between the church and state. And I just don't consider that conservative. So what happened with Trump is he was able to win the primary. Is that a cat you got there, Seth?
It is.
What's your cat's name?
Can you hear it through the mic?
No, but I could see its tail popping up into the shot there.
that's Moonsun. She's named. Yeah.
And so what happened with Trump is he was able to win the primary by getting those radical theocratic social conservatives to vote for him in the primary. And since it was such a wide field, the neoliberals and neoconservatives were drowned out. Now, truth be told, it also turns out, and I always kind of suspected this, but Trump's proven it. It also turns out that the percentage of the GOP coalition that was made up of those economic and foreign policy conservatives was always pretty small. And that's just proven by virtue of the fact that just about everybody in the party at the congressional level has absolutely betrayed both of those values. And the only thing they're still standing up for is that theocratic radicalism.
It really is quite astounding.
That's all that's left in the party at this point, which is sad. As somebody who is economically conservative and a foreign policy conservative, it's really sad for me to see that happen. And I think that the DNC is just kind of taking over that mantle, because all those never Trump conservatives, the Lincoln Project guys, Republican voters against Trump, Republicans for Biden, these things are crazy. None of that existed before Trump. Like that is a really weird phenomenon. Something like 17% of Republicans have left the party since Trump became the nominee. And then an additional 6 to 10% of the ones who remained registered Republicans still ended up voting for Joe Biden. So that's almost a quarter of the party that they've lost. And I think it's all those economic and foreign policy conservatives who were like, hang on, I thought we were just pandering to those theocratic loonies so that we could get them to vote for us. I didn't realize that it was going to be their party. I'm out, you know?
Do you really think that's going to be the case? I mean, let's say specifically in Georgia. I want to believe that, but I think that when it comes down to it, I want to believe that they're going to listen to Trump when he says don't vote in Georgia because it's all rigged and everything. But I think when it comes down to it, they're going to show up at the polls.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the religious mindset. I think some percentage of really true hardcore believers, the ones who would totally, drink the poison if the great leader asked them to, those people probably won't show up unless Trump himself asks them to. But it's hard for him to do that without admitting that the election's working just fine.
Right.
Right.
And you can tell.
I guess if I were him, I could say something like, well, it's probably going to be rigged again, but just in case, you should vote anyway.
And he can do that, and they'll just suck it up with no problem. But this is the thing. I mean, we know this about Trump. He's a pathological narcissist. It really comes down to him. I don't think he gives a damn one way or another how the election goes, because he's done. He's out of it. He has no loyalty to this system of people who have completely bent over backwards for him, destroyed any kind of reputation. I've seen this Lindsey Graham tweet going around so many times in the past week where he says, if we vote for Trump, we will be destroyed and we will deserve it. And sure enough, Lindsey Graham turns around. He's the biggest demagogue for Trump afterwards. Yeah. Trump is going to throw every single one of these people under the bus as soon as he has a chance. So they've destroyed themselves for him. And I'm just really hoping, because even if 1%, it's that close in Georgia, if 1% doesn't show up, it could change the entire next 4 years.
Well, the scary thing is, as long as the party remains the party of Trump, or Trumpism, even if Trump himself isn't running. He says he is going to run in 2024. We'll see. I mean, he's a very old guy. Maybe he won't even be around to run then, But it'll be interesting to see whether or not they can continue to win elections fairly. I think not, which is why they're cheating, right? Let's just be really blatant. That's exactly what they're doing here. They're hoping that some conservative appointed judges somewhere lower in the courts or higher in the courts will betray their oath as a judge to stand up for the rule of law and undermine the rule of law and undermine the Constitution in order to, have Trump declared the victor despite the fact that he lost, right? And this isn't just people have said that Hillary Clinton claimed that Trump's presidency was not legitimate. I think that's a bit unfair to compare that to what Trump is doing here, right? I mean, I think most people would acknowledge it's at least a different degree, right? Because what Clinton did is she immediately acknowledged that he was the president-elect, right? Mm-hmm. And then over the course of his presidency, she made arguments about how, the Russians had intervened on his behalf, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that undermines Trump's credibility and certainly makes him look like a person who's a threat to national security, right? But that's not the same as saying like it was a rigged election, right? And that he didn't really win, right? That's not, we now know that the Russians did in fact hack into some of our voting systems and attempted to change votes, but we also know that they weren't successful at changing enough votes to make a difference. So Trump really won that election. And at the same time, he was really aided by one of our enemies. Both of those things can be true. And if somebody, officially elected or not, is at the head of the country and is, cozying up with our enemies for his own personal political gain, that is something that's worth worrying about, whether or not he's the legitimate president. So I don't believe that Trump's presidency was ever called illegitimate in a credible way that is comparable to what Trump is apparently doing with Biden. I mean, because he's saying Biden didn't really win. Like is in not just he was helped by somebody or, did like a shady thing with the media here or there. He's saying the votes aren't real.
Right. Yeah, and he has no evidence to back it up. And to add on with what you said,
if he did, he would have won some of those he would have won all of those court cases. Like if it was really a rigged election, the Supreme Court would have turned it over.
Yeah, 100%. Bear with me one moment. I gotta take care of this cat. She needs to leave my room. Hold on. Mm-hmm. She hasn't made a peep for like 5 hours, and of course, as soon as we start the podcast, she has an issue.
I just finished my eggnog latte.
Okay, I need to go get me some immediately after this. I'm craving it. To add on what you said, the Biden administration, the Obama administration provided the transition resources that was necessary for Trump to get into office and start his administration, whatever that was, and we've seen just the flat out refusal for Trump to do the same. And at a certain
after a while, eventually it happened against his wishes.
Yeah, and this has been
for a long time.
In the midst of the worst health crisis that this country has seen in 100 years. Like he's kneecapping our ability to actually defend ourselves against threats, foreign and domestic. And it seems insane that his follower base is still as strong as it is. And just to add on with what we were saying earlier, I saw a clip just yesterday of Nick Fuentes, 22, alt-right commentator, banned from YouTube in February, but he's at this Million MAGA march, and he's starting a chant saying, "Destroy the GOP." The camera turns to this entire crowd of people who are all looking at this young kid, and they start saying, "Destroy the GOP. Destroy the GOP." So, Rio, the last time we spoke, you were saying something about, hey, I'm about to go off into the distance. I'm going to return to my party. I'm going to see how I can make changes, how I can lead things in my direction there. What does it look like to you seeing all of this happening in the past few weeks?
I mean, this is what happens, right? Because if people are loyal to Trump, but not to the party, right? This is one of the dangers of populism and this kind of anti-establishment rhetoric. It's one of the reasons why I really don't like Bernie Sanders because he does the same thing in the Democratic Party that Trump did in the Republican Party. It's a stupid political strategy at a minimum, because you need to maintain the trust and the loyalty of your voters in your party. And you can't do that by constantly bad mouthing the party and saying the only good thing about the party is me. And if I'm gone, then we all, right. And then it's doubly stupid to turn around and tell them to not bother to vote. I mean, it's crazy.
Do you think?
So yeah, no, it's the GOP made a pact with the devil, and now it's coming back to bite him in the ass. That's what's going on.
Do you think that there can be another, Trump 2.0? I know he's been saying, "Oh, I'm going to run again in 2024." I don't see that happening. I don't see any part of the GOP being able to harness whatever dark energy Trump has brought to the political spectrum here. I don't see someone filling in his shoes in a unifying. That is going to sound weird, but I don't see that happening. Do you know of anyone?
No, I mean, I think that's actually the problem, is that there isn't another alternative leader of the party. Since there is going to be an actual primary, there will be an opportunity for other people to step up and try to make the case that they would be a better leader of the party than the Republican Party. I'm sorry, than Trump. And one of the ways they're going to make that case is they're going to say, look, he lost. It didn't work, right? He barely won the first time, and then he lost. And we've lost 17% of people registered Republicans since he became the head of our party. We need to win those people back, that sort of thing. My concern is if it's another wide field, Trump right now in polls, and this is very preliminary, right? Obviously, it's way too early to take that seriously, but because it's 4 years ahead. But right now, if they were to hold the primary now, Trump would get about 50% of the vote, which is easily more than enough to win the nomination again. But that's because there's nobody else who's really stepping up and attacking Trump and trying to make the case for why they would be an alternative. I would really love to see maybe Mitt Romney try to do that. But there are just so few Republicans left who haven't pandered to Trump that it's really hard to see how they would do that. But, like Ted Cruz will probably run. It'll be really funny to see how he will have gone from, Donald Trump is a narcissist who's going to destroy the party to, oh my gosh, Donald Trump is the second coming of Jesus Christ. And then he's going to go back to Donald Trump as a narcissist who destroyed the party. I mean, he can flip on a dime, apparently. So turn on a dime.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anyone who's trying to make the case, oh, well, Trump lost, they're trying to make that case to an audience of people who do not fundamentally believe that. There's a massive percentage of voters who are going to say, probably to their grave, that this was a stolen election. So whenever someone's going to try to make the case to them, oh, well, look at the loser. Obviously, he wasn't talking about the right things. And even that case falls flat, considering that, he had the second largest turnout in history, which is insane. So, what role do you see the Lincoln Project having to coming up with in the post-election cycle? Because obviously they want to try and unify the GOP in some way, but how are they supposed to do that?
I don't think that's their strategy. I think that at this point they have burnt so many bridges with the GOP that they know that they aren't really going to be welcome back, which is a shame, but that's just the truth. And I think that the reason that they ran ads that were pro-Biden ads, right, and attack ads on Trump is because that was the only way to get Trump out, right? I definitely could see them running anti-Trump ads targeting Republicans in the primary if he runs again. That would probably happen. But truth be told, he's really popular among the Republican base. And so anybody, even just lower level down the ticket, like if you want to get the party back on track, you want to have fewer Trump-like people in Congress, but those people are going to be primaried if they aren't sufficiently pro-Trump right now. So I think that Trump needs to kind of be forgotten and ignored a little bit. I don't think that they are going to be able to actively campaign against him, except for if he does run in a primary, then they'll have to. They'll have no choice. But otherwise, I think that what they need to do is just, continue to pander to Trumpism slightly in the sense of like at least not explicitly denouncing it because you don't want to turn off all of your voters, but mainly move on to other things that you want to do. Stop talking about the sorts of things Trump talks about. Basically, go back to cynically manipulating those populists rather than actually giving them control over the party, which is what Trump did.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the people in the party or just endlessly kowtowing to him, what was it specifically the Supreme Court case that got slapped down from Texas? How many House GOP members signed on it? I think it was 104.
It was over 100. Yeah, it was a lot. And it was well over a dozen other state attorney generals, all Republicans, who signed on to it as well. It's crazy. It was an absolutely meritless case. So let's talk about the details of these for a second, because it is SCOTUS talk after all. So the Pennsylvania, there were two suits, right? There's a Pennsylvania suit and the Texas suit. And the Pennsylvania suit was the one that was struck down first. And the Texas suit was struck down very recently, just like on Friday night. Later in the day on Friday was when I found out about it. Anyway, but the Pennsylvania suit, it was brought by people in Pennsylvania who actually had standing to sue. So that is, so it had that going for it. Whereas the Texas case, that Texas didn't have standing to sue. And in fact, that's the reason that the court gave for throwing it out.
So my understanding of the Texas case was they were trying to sue about procedures that were occurring in other states.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Pennsylvania case first, because they're kind of similar, but different. Right. So in the case of the Pennsylvania case, their argument was that, governors and judges and other bureaucrats changed the rules of the election without consent of the legislature. And they used the pandemic as an excuse to do that. Well, there is actually a law on the books in Pennsylvania that allowed them to do that if there was an emergency, and pandemic clearly qualifies, right? But they still tried to sue at lower courts at the state level, and the state Supreme Court threw it out. And on the grounds that this was perfectly legal, what they did, right? But at least they had standing to sue. And then that made its way up to the Supreme Court. That's more of the traditional process that by which something normally makes it up to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court threw it out as well. And I think it's important to note that what was I going to say? In the case of the Texas case, the argument was that they have original jurisdiction, it's called, in the Supreme Court, right? And so original jurisdiction usually applies when there's a disagreement between two states, right? Which, so in this case, that is true. It is a disagreement between two states, but what the court determined is that Texas doesn't have any real standing to care about how Pennsylvania does its elections. So while original jurisdiction did apply, Texas still didn't have the standing to bring the case anyway. And it was also undermined by virtue of the fact that the very Pennsylvania case, for example, had shown that there are avenues to resolve the issue within the state, which is where it belonged. And in the case of both lawsuits, so the Texas law argument basically was the same thing. It was like these states, not just Pennsylvania, but like 4 states, it was Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, all allowed these rules to be changed without the consent of the legislature. Never mind the fact that the governor of Texas himself did the same thing, right? Like they weren't trying to throw out the results of any of the states that Trump won, where they also made changes to the election law and using the same process. And notably, in none of these cases, including the lower level cases, did they ever actually claim that there was any real fraud. They didn't, I think it's important to point out the difference between what Trump is saying publicly and what his lawyers are saying in court, where they can get in legal trouble for lying, right? So, right. I mean, what that means is Trump and his lawyers know that Trump is lying to the public.
Yes.
That's the only conclusion you can get out of that, because their arguments are based on these, oh, well, technically they shouldn't have been allowed to change the rules, that sort of thing. They're not actually claiming that there was any real fraud, that the votes were changed by the Dominion voting machines or anything like that, because there's no evidence for it. And because there is a paper trail, and it was actually a very secure election. And so they're not claiming it in court. If Trump really believed what he's telling the public, then why are his lawyers not arguing that in court?
Yep. And I spent a lot of time on C-SPAN, listening. I ran out of energy just because as any citizen should, be concerned about how secure are our elections. I gave up after hearing, in Pennsylvania they're talking about all these big vans leaving out boxes and boxes of new ballots and everything. You actually listen to the court proceeding, and it's there's a question of, were the poll watchers 12 feet or 6 feet apart? Publicly they're claiming, our poll watchers weren't allowed to be in the room. And then the judge will ask, how many Republican poll watchers were present on the day of the count? And the lawyer says, he waits for a little and he stumbles a bit and he says, it was a non-zero number, Your Honor. And then she's like, case dismissed. You're lying. They were there. They were present. It was actually about how far apart the poll watchers were because of the COVID procedures and vaccinations. So it is just so disingenuous for them to be saying and yelling out in public TV, look at all these ballots that are coming out of nowhere. And just like you said, they're not actually claiming any of that in court, because if they did, they'd be disbarred immediately.
Yeah, or sanctioned at a minimum. Yeah. And as it is, like, some of the cases were thrown out with prejudice, which is pretty bad and pretty damning, I mean, well, and frankly, Trump wasn't attracting the most competent judge or most competent lawyers, because any really competent lawyer would look at the case and immediately say, this is a waste of your time and money. This isn't going to win. You have no case.
Right.
Right. But I do think that is the key point. And you can argue about whether or not we should allow mail-in voting, right? But lots of states have allowed mail-in voting for years, and their elections still go on fine. If you want Pennsylvania to have stricter voting laws, then fight for those in Pennsylvania, right? That's the solution to that. And like it or not, there was a genuine emergency. And an elected governor of Pennsylvania has every right to do what he needs to do to protect the safety of his citizens. If you don't like any of that, then you need to oust that governor and get a new governor. And in some of these states, it's a Republican governor, like in Georgia. It's just absolutely bonkers. I mean, the people in charge of running the elections in Georgia were Republicans. And they certified the results. And so it really does come down to just this. It's a cult. It's religious belief. They don't want to believe that he lost, and so they won't. They're not going to believe it. They're not going to accept it. They're not going to accept reality because they are so far gone.
And today we're on the eve of the Electoral College convening and like officially certifying President-elect Biden. So a lot of people kind of say, well, that's the day, that's it. And after that, case closed, they don't really have anything to rely on. I know for a fact that it's going to continue up until the day that Biden is inaugurated on the 20th of January. But we're starting to really see a kind of escalation in the streets. I think last night in D.C., there were 4 people stabbed after the Million MAGA march or whatever. We're seeing calls to violence.
They love to call it things like million when it was like maybe, a couple thousand?
Couple thousand.
It wasn't that many people.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, D.C. is not like Trump country. And I think people were coming in from the woods into the city, but not that many of them.
Yep, they're coming in. You're seeing insane videos of like these guys wearing American flags as capes. They're going and assaulting people. They're pushing them down. They're yanking
Proud
this
Boys
woman.
In weird modern yellow kilts. Did you see that?
Yeah,
there's some weird stuff.
Yeah, I see a lot of that. It is a little strange. And what's really, really crazy is you look at it and you try to think objectively, how is history going to paint this picture of these people wearing these flags and doing all these things?
Not in a flattering way.
Not at all. Not at all. And whatever kind of criticisms you might have about the Black Lives Matter movement, people had a lot of criticisms about the Black Panthers and things like that. In history, when you look back, it's always the civil rights side that has the kinder light just cast on it in general. You have to work above and beyond on your cause to make sure that if you really believe in something, you can't have that imagery projected upon you. I don't think they care at all. And I'm honestly concerned that in the coming weeks, we're going to see an escalation of violence.
They were pulling Black Lives Matter signs down from churches.
From churches, yes.
And burning them.
Yep.
On the streets. That is a crime, right? You're stealing property off of a church and then destroying it. right? I mean, that's just as much of a crime as if you'd thrown a rock through the window of the church. It's what it is. And so I think that the police, and I said this about the left-wing riots, right?
Right.
In both cases, people who protest peacefully should absolutely be allowed to do so. The police should not harass peaceful protesters like many did, and that's seriously fucked up, right? But also at the same time, people who are committing crimes should be wound up and put in jail. That's what you need to do. It's that simple. They shouldn't be the cops shouldn't be standing by and watching these people commit a hate crime. It's seriously messed up. It's truly awful. And especially in a city like DC, I would expect a crackdown if it continues. I really would.
I heard some.
And they would be justified in doing it, just as they were justified in cracking down on the other riots.
I heard some reports that the line of cops basically just stand by, watch it happen, and the Proud Boys are allowed to go back behind the line. I mean, I heard that in Kenosha after Kyle Rittenhouse. I heard he basically ran up to the police officers with a full assault rifle around his shoulder. If you were black and you tried to do that, you'd be toast.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there were people protesting the mask mandates by bringing weapons and to like local politicians' offices and shouting at them through the door with guns in their hands. I mean, absolutely. Those people should have all been arrested. I think that the mayor of DC needs to step in if this continues and say, like, here are these cops. You guys are not doing your jobs. Do your jobs. I'm ordering you to, enforce the law.
Someone in the chat.
They're clearly not going to do it unless they're told to. So make them do it, or fire them if they don't.
You're exactly right. Someone in chat also has a very good point that there are very important rules on how you can use the American flag, and wearing it on the back of your neck.
Yes, any real patriot knows that, right?
Yeah.
You see it driving through Trump country, you'll see flags that are being hung sideways and all sorts of different things that you're not supposed to do. It's not supposed to touch the ground. I don't know all of the rules, but I know enough to know that there are some. And if I had a flag, I would look them up and follow them. Because if you don't do that, that's anti-patriotic.
Yeah.
That's anti-patriotic. It's just, these people are truly ignorant. I mean, nowadays, ignorance is a choice. Because again, you have Google. You look it up right now in 5 minutes. What are the rules for how to hang a flag, right? And if you want to, you can read the Wikipedia article that'll have the historical explanation for why these rules developed. And then you'll come out of it with a better understanding of our traditions as a nation. And somebody who's really patriotic should want to respect those.
So, Rio, a question I have for you. Do you think that I'm being unrealistic in my concerns for the type of escalation that I see happening? Because, for instance, you don't tell all your followers. Trump's not going to tell all of his followers that everything's rigged. His own spokespeople aren't going to go out and say boycott the vote in Georgia, because what they're saying there, when they're saying boycott the vote in Georgia, they're saying if you want to get things changed, it's not going to be through democracy. The only alternative at that point is violence.
Yep.
And that's the message that they're preaching.
It's one of many things that the populist alt-right and the populist far left have in common. How many times have you spoken to somebody on Twitter who says, like, oh, I don't even bother to vote because the whole system is rigged, and, our form of democracy isn't a real democracy anyway, and blah, 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 right? Also, the election was stolen from Bernie Sanders. He should have won, even though, like, no, he didn't. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. They're spreading kooky conspiracy theories on both ends of the horseshoe.
The difference
here
is
what's going on
is that it's coming from the top.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. That is a very important difference. And I absolutely, somebody who really dislikes Bernie Sanders, I have to give him credit there, right?
Yeah.
He is not going around spreading the conspiracy theory that the election was rigged. He's doing the right thing and endorsing the nominee, etc. Trump wouldn't do that. Do you think Trump's going to endorse the nominee if he doesn't win the next primary? He'll say, this was rigged. Don't vote for them. Because he doesn't care about the party. He only cares about himself. And to be honest, I think it's fine to not be partisan. I'm not really a partisan person either. I think that the smartest way to get your policies through our system is to reward both parties for moving in the direction that you want it to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how I thought about it when I voted for Joe Biden, because I was simultaneously punishing the GOP for betraying true right-wing values through this national socialist populist nightmare, right? And rewarding the DNC for rejecting their own populist radicals, right? I mean, you actually have to go to a socialist like Bernie Sanders to find somebody who shares Donald Trump's protectionist trade policies and isolationist foreign policies. That is something, until Trump came along, you had to be significantly to the left of the Democratic Party. We're living through a realignment, and you can reward both parties and punish both parties accordingly. So I'm not arguing for partisan loyalty per se, but I do think that part of winning is, once a party does adopt whatever policy you want, you've got to get enough of those people in office for them to pass it, and you're going to see this happening with a lot of the far lefties are going to be really mad that Bernie Sanders isn't going to, get his public option healthcare bill passed, right?
Yep.
They would prefer single payer, but public option would be progress. They're going to be really mad that he doesn't get that passed, but it's going to be their fault, not Joe Biden's fault, because they didn't elect enough Democrats in the Senate. Mitch McConnell will 100% not allow the vote to even happen in the Senate as long as there's a Republican majority.
So
how is Biden supposed to pass legislation if McConnell won't even let the Senate vote on it? Right. So, I mean, I get it. Like, if you're a far lefty, you don't agree with Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden is much closer to me. He's actually to my left, but I'm willing to compromise a little, just like the other side should too. Right. But you've got to, yes, by all means, try to persuade him and move the party in the direction you want it to go. But you also have to vote for one, so don't be blindly partisan. That's stupid. Right. But at some point, you got to pick a team and help it win, So to go back to your question about the Lincoln Project, I think that as long as the GOP remains a Trumpist party, the Lincoln Project is going to continue to not in primaries, because in primaries, except for the presidential primary, if Trump runs, they will definitely be running anti-Trump ads in that case. And they'll probably back a horse, I would think. But other than that, it's not really effective to try to change that in the primary, because the base loves Trumpism, right? So what the Lincoln Project's going to do is they're going to find Democrats who are tolerable to them, who frankly might actually be to the right of the Republican on trade and foreign policy anyway. Keep in mind, remember I said there were three parts of the coalition. So the two parts of the coalition that left are the ones who are going to prefer Joe Biden's policies over Donald Trump's, right? So those people might as well be Democrats for now. And we might be living through another shift where maybe 10 years from now, the GOP has fully become like the National Socialist left-wing Labor Party. And the DNC has maybe moved right on economics, maybe moderated a little bit on some social issues like guns and immigration, right? That's a possibility.
It very much is.
If that's the case, then all those Lincoln Project people are going to be Democrats, and that's going to make it that much harder for left-wing Democrats to take over that party. So some of those people are going to probably switch over to the Republican Party. So that's interesting. The other option is the GOP could learn its lesson, because Trumpism is losing. If that happens, then maybe they will recenter on something more like their old coalition, in which case all those Lincoln Project people will go back to the GOP. Problem solved.
Yeah, I don't currently see that happening. But to lend credence to your point, there was that I made a tweet where someone photoshopped Donald Trump's face over a Bernie Sanders tweet that talked about, hey, look at how all these other countries have subsidized with cash to their workers during this pandemic. All these clearly, socialist types of policies, they put Trump's face on the tweet. It gets a whole bunch of likes, a whole bunch of conservative people saying, hell yeah, he's for the working people. Look at this. Mm-hmm. It is literally that close to, if he wanted to, he could become the Nationalist Socialist Party of America, and we would see...
well, in many ways he is. Let's talk about how he got so many votes. It was a lot of people voted for Trump. A lot of people voted for Biden. A lot more people voted, period. Mm-hmm. And a much smaller percentage voted for third parties, which means that people were motivated, I think, largely by either loving or hating Donald Trump. This election was a referendum on Trump, and he lost. But I think part of the reason he was able, turnout among the white working class was higher than ever, right? And I think it's partially because he mailed out all those checks with his name on them.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've spoken to Trump supporters who literally think that Donald Trump sent them money.
Yep. And I also
Right?
see
It's like,
people.
no, that was paid for with my tax dollars. You should be thanking me, not Donald Trump. But he got to put his name on it as if it was coming from his personal checking account. And his supporters ate it up.
And that caused a
They
massive.
love socialism as long as it's only for white people. That's
Yep.
pretty much what it boils down to. It's quite sad.
And that caused a massive delay in them getting the check sent out in the first place. That added in a huge backlog to actually getting physical checks sent out. If you had a direct deposit, it was in there ASAP, but he wanted to have his name on the check because he's all about branding and everything. And it worked.
Yeah, my wife and I got direct deposits. Because we pay our taxes and stuff, right? And we still got this weird, creepy letter from the White House about how this money was, basically all thanks to, the great dictator Donald. It's like, Congress doesn't deserve any credit for actually passing it. It's all about him just, signing his name.
So another dynamic
that you can literally train a monkey to do.
Yeah, literally. And I feel like there should be some law against them using the office in that manner. It's just insane that was something that happened. And as someone
it should not have been permitted. It's absolutely terrible. It's
and
terrible.
As someone in the chat is mentioning,
that is the sort of thing that third world dictators do, right?
Yep. Everything that he does is out of a dictator's playbook, and he constantly talks about how much he loves the way the dictator is able to run their country without the rule of law. He wishes that he could be one, and it is kind of a testament to how the United States operates and how our institutions have withstood these kinds of attacks. If you try and compare us to a nation state like China, where everything comes from the top down, just the way that it works is so fundamentally different than the United States. If we were any other place than the United States, Trump would have been able to do it. He's so bad at authoritarianism. I don't know if he was a little bit better at it, if he would have succeeded. I think that our culture is just different, and we have some natural barriers in place to safeguard ourselves from it. But I don't have.
I mean, the populace really aren't going to like me today, but I don't think they ever do. I mean, we were saved by elites is what happened, right? Because if you look at other places where democracies turned into dictatorships, such as Nazi Germany, for example, right? In order for that to happen, you need judges, right, to undermine the rule of law and on your behalf, right? And that just is not what happened in this case. Even people appointed by Trump in the end did the right thing. If not for that, we absolutely would have lost our democracy. And that was Trump's goal. And now people immediately around him, and to some extent, even Trump himself is hinting at it on Twitter, are calling for a military coup.
Yeah.
And his supporters certainly are. Oh, the military will step in and save us. From what? From this rigged election that didn't happen and that even Trump's own lawyers didn't even claim happened?
Yep.
It's absolutely, you cannot overstate. That is treason. That is sedition. That is calling for a civil war, right? Yep. I mean, we should be rounding up these Trump people and trying them for treason. Seriously.
On that point,
the ones who were saying that on Twitter, like if on Twitter, I was really mad at Donald Trump for being a traitor, right? And I was to say something on Twitter like, oh, somebody ought to go out and shoot that guy, right? I would get the FBI at my door, right?
Yes.
Well, that should be happening when people are calling for a military coup overthrowing the government.
Constantly
right?
just dropping hints left and right.
They're publicly announcing that they support terrorism, right?
Yes. And calling for succession from the United States. And that's the other dynamic, too, is that you've got this, and this happens every election cycle. There's this giant, it's time for all the Republicans in California, we're going to go off and do our own thing. Texas is going to go off and have its own place. What is interesting, though, is that I think we are at a point where there are multiple factions, not only on the left, but also on the right, of people who are extremely fed up and are trying to succeed in one form or another from the United States. I'm very involved in the crypto space, or I'm getting more involved in the crypto space, and a lot of people are sick and tired of our financial system right now, and the way that it's constantly printing money. A lot of people are being drawn into, the new gold standard of Bitcoin, and they're trying to create their own financial market, separating away from the nation state of the United States in that manner. It's less political in that sense, but there are multiple factions of people who are so done with the ineptitude, the absolute just lack of action from our Congress. And right now there are thousands of people in bread lines, in food lines, not bread lines, but, thousands of cars, miles long.
And it's really sad to see, especially, I mean, a lot of them by absolutely no fault of their own whatsoever, right? There just aren't jobs to be had in some places. They got laid off from one and they can't find another one, right? And in some places they're kind of not even allowed to work, or at least for part of the time they weren't. So yeah, no, it's not good.
I'm seeing news articles today that I foresaw happening as I understood Andrew Yang and all of the things he was talking about. I'm seeing news articles today that is basically the future that I envisioned if nothing was done, if UBI wasn't passed. So it's like we're past the point of no return right here, and it seems like, I don't know. Do you have some predictions for the next couple of months? I want to hear your thoughts. I want to make an educated guess as to what you think the year 2021 is going to look like.
I would say at a bare minimum, we're going to see some more rioting, and probably some acts of terrorism, coming from the alt-right. I think you're probably going to see multiple attempts to assassinate Biden once he's in there. I don't think we're going to see a military coup, but I think the fact that people are even calling for it, including some people who are in the military, is absolutely terrifying. We are living through a dark period, and I mean, it's not a coincidence that these people fly Confederate flags, which is a symbol of treason, right? They are traitors. That is what they are. Bottom line. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be pretty bad. I think it's going to be really gross. And I think at a bare minimum, Trump, whether he runs again or not, he's going to, create Trump TV or something along those lines, or buy into OAN or something. I think he already owns parts of it, or someone in his family doesn't, in case I'm not sure about that. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, he's going to be on television encouraging people to continue to believe that Joe Biden is not a real president, that he was installed, by the ghost of Fidel Castro or whatever bullshit they believe. And that's really bad for the country.
Hugo Chavez.
It's really bad for the country. I mean, I think that in order to de-radicalize people, we have to have some compassion and give them a door to come out of the cult, right? But what I don't think we should do is give them a free pass to stay in the cult without social consequences. I think it needs to be a combination of, once you see the truth and you see that Trump is a traitor and you regret having supported him, you're welcome back into civil society with open arms. Because if we don't welcome them back, that's just going to radicalize them further.
Right.
But what we should not do is pretend that it's okay for them to continue going down the traitorous path that they're on. They need to know that's unacceptable. And, I think that friends and family should tell them that and say, look, I still love you or whatever, but what you are doing right now is treason against the country. You are believing in some really scary, kooky stuff. And, until you work that out, I don't really want to be seen with you, because you're, kind of an awful person right now. I think that a little compassion and tough love together is what we need to de-radicalize these folks.
Some good news that I was reading today, and I don't know, maybe it was sensationalized, was the idea that Parlay, but it's Parler, because the people who made Parler now say that it's Parler.
Speak.
I know, yeah, and now they're like, no, we always meant for it to be Parler, because they don't want to try and patronize or be condescending to their followers. Basically, they're all getting bored on the website. It shot up in huge amounts of popularity right around the time of the election, because Twitter was cracking down on some of Trump's crazy stuff, and so it shot up. And what they're finding over there is that they're getting bored because they don't have anyone to argue with, because it's just this gigantic.
Did you see that Milo Yiannopoulos was having a mental breakdown on there?
Yeah, I saw that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was saying these Trump justices were a total waste of time. We supported this buffoon, this clown, for no reason, because we didn't even get justices that are going to do the right thing, by which he means, to undermine democracy itself. That's the ironic thing, is they did do the right thing. And Trumpists, that speaks to their character, are upset that they did the right thing, right?
Yeah. I saw
But yeah, he was saying like, I'm down with the GOP, burn it to the ground. I'm going to devote my life to destroying this party. Well, that's what you get when you play with fire.
I saw a Parlor post. It was a picture of Amy Coney Barrett, and it was like a meme caption above and below her, and it said, worthless bitch. I'm going to avoid the language here. And then the bottom text said, N-word lover. Just the nastiest toxicity. The moment that Supreme Court ruling came through, they really showed their true colors. It was disturbing to me to see, and
yeah,
that is who they are, and they need to be told, like, you're not accepted in society. You're a pariah. You are a pariah, yes, and if you associate with these people, you are a pariah.
Well, and frankly, that is just what is called for, right? I don't think we should have legislation that outlaws being a Nazi like they do in Germany. I think that is a bridge too far. I do believe in freedom of speech, but part of freedom of speech is that it goes both ways. You make your deplorable views public, and people have every right to hold you accountable for that in their lives. Like you are not entitled to a job. You are not entitled to, a spouse. You are not entitled to access to your best friend. You're not entitled to access to your parents. Like good people need to, and like I said, I don't think we should radicalize them further, right? So I think we have to make sure that when we communicate this, we are making them feel guilty, not shameful, right? Because shame means like, I feel like I'm a bad person, whereas guilt is I'm doing something wrong, right? And so what's more effective, and I even said bad person, that's probably, not actually the right approach. It'd be more effective to say something like, you're a better person than this. This is beneath you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that we need to make it clear that the path they're on is toxic. Honestly, I think a lot of these people will de-radicalize themselves just because they didn't succeed. I think that over time they will get demoralized. They'll realize it didn't work out. They'll probably, a lot of them, Milo Yiannopoulos is already blaming Trump for not winning, right? He's mad at daddy for not getting him the Ferrari or whatever. And so that they're going to start to say, gosh, we put everything behind this guy. Milo said that, I threw my whole career behind him. I lost my social capital, and I'm no longer a respected person because of him. And here we are, we still didn't get anything out of it, right? And so what's going to happen is they're going to get demoralized. So they're going to get mad at Trump himself. And that's a very healthy thing. But it's also, I think, important to put it into perspective. If Trump had succeeded at this coup, they would be celebrating, right? And so, that says something about who they are.
This is the perfect moment.
Not all of our fellow Americans are good people, but they can, hopefully, most of them have it within them. You can speak to their better side. Hopefully, Trump's loss gives us the opportunity to try to persuade these people to be their better selves.
You brought up an interesting place to bring this point in really quick. I had someone in chat earlier say, can you guys talk about how Trump in 2016 ran on populist issues like bringing back factory jobs and infrastructure, but as president enacted Paul Ryan's agenda? Like you were bringing up, I heard Nick Fuentes before I realized just how absolutely insane this guy is, constantly deriding Trump for failing to do the wall, for failing to bring in this white ethno state that he truly understood. Yeah.
I mean, especially because in this case, the GOP had control of Congress and the Senate for 2 years, for the first 2 years of Trump's presidency, and they didn't do the wall.
They were really pissed for a certain amount of time, and I think that they got a little bit more slack to say, oh, well, now it's the Democratic House and everything. But now that same person is turning around and saying we have to destroy the GOP because they didn't support Trump in his coup.
Yeah.
So it really is kind of bizarre to me that these people saw him fail fundamentally to even do the populist things that they wanted from him to do when he had the opportunity to do it, and yet still they're following along in this manner. It's crazy.
In all fairness, there's only so much that Trump can do. Like I said about Biden, if the Republicans maintain control of the Senate, then there's not a lot he can do. But the things that he can do this is what makes me so happy. The things that Biden can do are the things that I actually want him to do. So he can get us out of those unilateral trade wars, which were and are an example of Trump actually following through on his populist policies. Trade wars are stupid. Doing it unilaterally is extra stupid. If you really want to force China to play by the rules of international trade, you need to get all of the liberal democracies of the world, all the capitalist countries of the world together and collectively cut China out. Even then it would be hard because China can go trade with Russia and other, North Korea and other bad actors anyway, right? It's part of one of the characteristics of populism is that people think that our problems are easy to solve when they're just not, and they're attracted to simplistic black and white ways of thinking. And it's also important to point out Trump wasn't just having a trade war with China. He was having a trade war with Canada, I mean, so again, he actually really was following through on that Bernie Sanders-esque far left protectionist trade policy. It just happens, I'm on the right, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt if you don't share my worldview. But from where I'm coming, I don't think that left-wing policies actually are good ideas. I don't think they work in practice. I think we have lots of examples of failed states to prove it. As we all know, because we're part of the Yang Gang, most of those jobs are being lost to automation anyway.
Right.
And frankly, if you try to force them to all come back, and I'm pointing out, Trump really did follow through on that because that is something the president has the power to do. He had to find really shady workarounds, like claiming that trade with Canada was a threat to national security in order to do it, which is a big fuck you to Canada.
Claiming that China was paying tariffs.
Well, he thinks China, let's be clear, American businesses pay tariffs on imports from China. Those costs get passed on to the consumer, right? Mm-hmm. But the idea being you want to try to force those companies to make everything themselves in the country in order to avoid the tariffs. But in practice, it's just way more effective if you're a business that's manufacturing televisions. Even if it's being put together in the United States, a lot of the parts are going to come from other companies, not all of which are in the US, because some parts of the world are better at making certain kinds of things. And like it or not, we just live in a modern world now. It's a global world. It's a small world. We're so connected. We can talk to somebody on the other side of the world. It's no matter how much you might want it to go back to 1950, it's just not possible, right? Yeah. So, but even if you have all those tariffs, well, we've had them for years now, and a few manufacturing jobs came back, but most of the time, what happens is they just automate, right? Because the only reason they were outsourcing to China is because it's cheaper to pay a person in China than it is to set up robots in the U.S. But robots in the US are still a hell of a lot cheaper than paying a living wage to all of these American workers, right? So automation is responsible for 80-90% of those job losses. And those trade wars are just taxes on American businesses and on American consumers. And unlike Yang's freedom dividend, we aren't getting the benefit of those taxes.
Right. But unfortunately, everything that you're saying right now, this is making me feel that even if Biden comes and reverses that, it's not going to be anything tangible. And we're living in this post-truth era. We've really reached an Orwellian foothold in history right now, where no one can agree on the state of reality within the world. And I feel like
and it's a problem. It's a problem on the far left as well as the alt-right. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's a problem everywhere on the political spectrum. There are a lot of self-described centrists who also are getting misinformation. But I have noticed that it is mostly a problem on the extremes.
The way I see it, we're not going to be able to progress unless there's something that can be done that can create a shared understanding of the world amongst people across far distances. My personal thought is that the only thing that we can do is a universal basic income. That's something that no one can argue against. It's something almost 80% of the country agrees. We need checks in American hands. It's so bizarre. You brought up, hey, we're a globalist world. There's just no getting around that truth. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I don't really recognize myself as a Tennessean or even a citizen of the United States of America. I'm more of a citizen of the internet than I am culturally a Southerner.
Well, these days it's the only place we can hang out.
It is the only, yeah, especially during a pandemic, and it could be accelerating adoption and everything. But I am able to have conversations with people of different nationalities. I don't hear their accents. Right. I am fundamentally someone who culturally associates myself more with ones and zeros, digital subcultures. I'm able to parse the lingo of these abbreviated emojis and LOLs and LMAOs and all of these different terminologies. Really, it is fundamentally a nation state within the internet that is forming and growing and bypassing a lot of everything that human history has up to this point kind of become knowledgeable with. There's a growing group of people who believe that an alternative is forming, and This just brings me back to my question about succession is so many people are fed up right now. And if nothing happens in the next 4 years to solve some of these problems, we're going to see some really crazy historical actions happen. And
maybe people have been talking about secession. I mean, there's a California nationalist party that wants California to secede, which would make a heck of a lot more sense than most of Trump countries seceding. I think Texas would probably be all right on its own, but most of Trump country is very poor. And most of them actually take more in federal benefits than they contribute in federal taxes. They're more like medieval, like feudal societies than they are like modern capitalist societies. By which I mean, you have a handful of very, very, very rich people. And then, the great unwashed masses of people who are uneducated and really, really poor. And they're getting money from California and New York, and that's keeping them afloat. So if they were to leave, by the way, I don't think this is likely at all. But if they were to leave, frankly, it would be kind of like a burden off of the shoulders of the more successful states, because those states are just a drain on our economy. With Texas as a notable exception, and I guess Florida, Florida would probably be fine too.
Yeah,
but even Texas and Florida are not, they're not as wealthy as like California. California would be the 8th richest country in the world by itself.
It's really crazy to think that at a certain point, I mean, one Wyomingian is worth like 1,000 Californians, and if anyone should want to succeed, it should be Silicon Valley, and saying, well, we're not going to be putting up with Mitch McConnell, someone who's got 18% approval rating. How the hell did he get reelected? We live in a world that's just so deeply divided. Partisan
gerrymandering is part of it. Yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of democratic reforms that Yang has proposed that would be great, and some of which that the Democratic Party has already adopted as official policy.
Hey, let's talk about him really quick.
Vote in Georgia for the Democrat. Okay, if you don't do that, Biden isn't going to be able to do much, right? He'll be able to fix the stuff that I'm worried about. He'll be able to end Trump's trade war. He'll be able to get us back into the Paris Climate Accord. He'll be able to renegotiate nuclear deals with Iran and North Korea. He'll be more. He'll return to a neoconservative foreign policy that the bipartisan establishment has supported since World War II, and which I think is a good thing. He can do all that without Congress. The stuff that the left wants him to do, he absolutely needs Congress for that. And no matter how much they might want Biden to abuse executive orders in order, at some point, first of all, Biden's not going to do that because he is much more conservative than Trump in that respect. He actually respects our democratic institutions, unlike Donald Trump. But secondly, even if he tried it, the courts are going to strike it down at some point, right? There are real limits on what he can do with an executive order. I think he absolutely should get DACA going again. That's a no-brainer because the court's already ruled that was okay anyway. But he can't create money out of thin air just through an executive order to give everybody a UBI. He can't, other than tweaking around the edges of the healthcare system using existing law like Medicare and so forth, there's very little that he can do without Congress. So it's up to us to give him. And by the way, even having a majority of Democrats still doesn't guarantee that we're going to get anything, because you're still going to have the conservative Democrats versus the progressive Democrats arguing about stuff. And if the progressives, make the perfect the enemy of the good, even with a Democratic majority, they're probably not going to be able to pass anything.
What is up with that? The GOP does not have to deal with that issue.
Oh boy. I mean, the GOP is just such a mess, like they are clearly really good at falling in line. They have groupthink. Ironically, the supposedly right-wing party in this country is the one that thinks much more like in a much more of a collectivist, conformist manner. Whereas the conservative tradition that I espouse has more to do with individualism. And that's where like the small government tradition comes from. And it is neoliberal and neoconservative, and frankly, just classically liberal is what my form of conservatism is. Whereas Trump's is some kind of weird theocratic national socialist, Nazi bullshit. It's scary as hell.
Mm-hmm. It is. It really does astound me, because you're the second person I've heard say that recently, that the Democratic Party would run into the issue of conservative Democrats voting against policies going forward that a majority of Americans want.
Well, yeah, especially since like a lot of former Republicans are Democrats now, including voters like myself. So they're just going to be contending with that. That's reality.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane. What do you think about the news that Andrew Yang's thinking of making a run for mayor of New York City?
I mean, I think that'd be great. Early polls show that he would have a real shot of it. I think it's much more realistic than him, becoming president with absolutely no political experience. I think running for, Congress or the Senate would be even better, actually, because it turns out that mayors of New York don't tend to do very well. But maybe this combination of Andrew Yang and being a mayor, most of the mayors of New York who have run have not had a lot of the qualities that we like about Yang. They weren't as charismatic. They were perceived as very right wing within the context of the Democratic Party. Like Bloomberg, for example, like that's, that he didn't have a prayer. So maybe as a mayor, Yang would. One of the things he has going for him is that his approval is really high. It's like higher than anybody else in the Democratic Party. I think his like actual approval is through the roof. Although that I'm sure depends on which poll you're looking at, and I might have just noticed that particular one because I'm pro Yang. But however you look at it, his approval is high. But people, when they were asked in the primary why they didn't vote for him, they said, "I really like him. I think he'd be great for Secretary of the Treasury or whatever. I think he should totally run for the Senate or something, right? But I just feel like he doesn't have enough experience in government to be president," which frankly is a perfectly valid criticism, right? I mean, we just had a guy with no government experience in the White House, and we saw how well that worked out, right? Now, of course, Yang would be way better than Trump. We know that, but I also don't blame people for holding that against him, frankly. It's a perfectly valid reason not to support him. So now if he goes back in there, he still has high approval rating, and he now has a much better relationship with the media, right? Even though a lot of Yang Gang got mad at him for selling out and going on CNN. That was dumb. Of course, that's a good thing for Yang to do, because he's building a positive relationship with the media, so he'll get better coverage next time. That's good, you guys, right? And if he runs for mayor, that's not selling out either. That is preparing himself for a run for president.
Unfortunately, and I haven't really made a huge stink about this on my Twitter account because I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I think he has much more to lose in this scenario than to gain, even in the sense of experience, because most of his policy proposals require federal action. A universal basic income, that's not going to be possible. He's not going to, if he tries to levy a 10% tax in New York City, that is only on New York City, along with all of the other taxes that they already have to deal with, there'll be massive backlash. He won't be able to move forward with any of the big proposals that he has, maybe police reform in New York City.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, like, I think it's possible to get a UBI at the city level. I think it certainly is possible, but I don't think that should be his reason for running. I think also, frankly, he doesn't even have to be president in order to get these things done either, for that matter, right? Yeah. He needs to stay in the public eye to continue to influence the conversation around policy, to continue to tell more people about UBI, and to keep supporting, endorsing, and backing people who support UBI for other positions in Congress and so forth. I mean, like he could help us get a UBI without ever being president.
Yes. Yeah, that is true. That is true. I mean, and this is going to sound crazy, but New York City is exactly the type of place where $1,000 would not go very far. If you don't have that interstate mobility increase of people having the option to take their $1,000 to where it's going to be more of a boon, then you actually might wind up in a situation where that's really funneled up into the rent seekers of New York City. I'm sure that there would be some improvement to workers' health, but yeah, I just think that if people might have the wrong idea about what Andrew Yang would be able to accomplish as the mayor of New York City, and it's going to be so easy for the media to paint him in a negative light like Cuomo. It would be a lot easier for people, right-leaning news organizations to deride him as the mayor of a blue city, blue state.
That's true, but he'll be running as a Democrat, so that's not necessarily a problem. I think especially because we've been having all these conversations about populism and how, like, I'm an economic conservative and so forth. I think it's always good to remind people why somebody like me would support Yang's freedom dividend. And I think understanding why people like me support it will actually help get it passed, because it means that you're going to get some of those conservative Democrats. You're going to even get some Republicans. The reason that McConnell doesn't want to let something go up for a vote is because he knows that the Democrats might be able, especially a president like Biden, right, who has a great working relationship across the aisle. He's very respected by Republicans. And I'm not one of those who thinks that is a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. And the reason it's a good thing is because if it actually goes up for a vote, Biden only needs to persuade one or two or three Republicans to vote for the bill, and some of those Republicans will vote for that bill. They're working across the aisle is not a bad thing. It drives me crazy when people say, nothing gets done in Washington. Okay, well, part of the reason it's not getting done is because the extreme bases of both parties are punishing their representatives every time they try to work with the other side. But in a democracy, to get things done, you have to work with the other side sometimes, So the reason it's so important to get McConnell out of that position as the majority leader is you've got to get just let people vote on it, right? If there's a vote and you lose two or three progressive Democrats, but you get two or three Republicans, right? Moderate Republicans, then you can still pass your bill, right?
Yeah.
So and it might not have everything that the far left wants, but the far left is never going to get what they want because there just aren't enough people in the Democratic Party in Congress who support those things. That's part of the reason why, again, I give Bernie Sanders lots of credit for lots of things. Like, for example, when it came out that Russia was helping him during the primary, he did the opposite of what Trump did. And he said, I denounce this. I don't want their support. Their interference in our election is an attack upon our democracy. And if I'm president, I will punish them for that. That is a good thing to say. And that makes him a better person, and frankly more conservative than Trump, in the sense that he's actually standing up for good aspects of the status quo, like we're a democracy, a democratic republic, of course, right? With representative democracy. It's a form of democracy. He was standing up for that. That's good. So why would somebody like me support a UBI? Well, because it's a compromise, to be honest. Like that's really why. Okay. And because I do recognize that people who are as right-wing as I am are a minority. We're not even a majority of the Republican Party, as you are seeing play out, right? With the rise of the alt-right. And I like to point out that if they were really right-wing, you wouldn't need to put alternative in front of it. So I'm a minority. I have to work with the other side. I would prefer, my default position would be to do away with the welfare state and also do away with income taxes. But that's not going to happen, right? I'm a realist who recognizes that's not going to happen because even a majority of Republicans don't want that, right? So it's just, there are libertarian people who have this who are deluded, who think that there's that all they have to do is get in a few more arguments on Twitter and our perfect, a narco-capitalist paradise will manifest itself. No, it's
It's never going to happen. That is as deluded as the people who think we're going to turn into the Soviet Union because Bernie Sanders became president. It's not going to happen, right? So I have to compromise, and I like UBI as a compromise because what does it do? Well, first of all, it doesn't stack on welfare, so it gets people off welfare. That's what it does. They can stay on it. They're not being forced off, right? But as our current system exists, one of the reasons why I don't like our tax and spend nanny-state is it traps people on welfare. It punishes them for succeeding. If they get a job or they start making money with an Etsy business or whatever, they could lose that stuff. What UBI does is it says, okay, yeah, you're going to lose that, but you can keep this. And this, unlike your welfare, this will actually stack on any other money you make. So instead of disincentivizing people to succeed, we're now incentivizing them to succeed, right? It is a compassionate compromise that will get people off welfare. So that's actually, as a right winger, I want that. But that is an important note. I absolutely will not vote for a bill that does stack on welfare. And that's why. Okay? Like it or not, you don't have to agree with me, but I'm just saying there are more people like me in the Democratic Party than people who want, to destroy capitalism or whatever, right? It's not going to happen. All right. Now, secondly, I like the fact that it's not means tested, which means it acts as de facto tax relief for the middle class, right? So I'm not going to get the big tax cut that I want, but in practice, if I'm getting a middle class couple an extra, $24,000 a year back from their taxes, for a lot of middle class families, that's like cutting their taxes in half, right? That's crazy. That would be the biggest middle class tax cut in history. Or at least in modern history. That's amazing, right? Because usually tax cuts only benefit super rich people. I actually want it to benefit, the middle class because they need the money more, frankly, right? And because the system we have now, rich people pay more than the middle class, or rich people pay less as a percent of their income than the middle class. That's really stupid, right? So This is a way of fixing that. If you try to stack it on welfare or if you try to means test it, then you're going to lose people like me. And that I know that sounds confusing because a lot of people assume like, the means testing happens because it's supposedly the conservatives who want to means test it. I don't think that's true. I think that whether Yang becomes president or not, somebody needs to go in and talk to Nancy Pelosi and Paul Ryan and everybody in Congress and just sell them on this idea one at a time and say, look, this is de facto tax relief for your constituents. And actually, since it doesn't stack on welfare, it's actually welfare reform that will encourage people and incentivize people to actually get out and participate in the market and get work.
I mean, you would agree that there are some forms of welfare that it should stack with, just not the cash-like welfare, right?
I mean, I'm willing to negotiate on those details, but yeah, I definitely think that if you allow it to stack on welfare in general, what it's going to do is you're no longer getting them off of that welfare cliff, right? Because let's say food stamps and discounted housing or whatever, right? You want it to stack on that. Well, okay, I can understand why from the compassion side you would want that, but also what you're doing is you're still maintaining a disincentive structure where that person is not going to want to go get a job. So yeah, they'll have a little more money in their pocket, which is a good thing. But if they get a job or start a business, then they're going to lose their house. So they're going to lose their food stamps, right? So I do think that it is a much better incentive structure to replace those things with a UBI. And Yang's approach of allowing people to choose rather than forcing people off of programs, I think is the most compassionate way of doing that.
Right. Okay. I think I interrupted you through that, or maybe you were finished. So do you feel overall here at the end of the podcast, are you feeling optimistic about the future? How are you feeling, good or bad?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty optimistic. I'm much more optimistic than I would be if Trump was getting reelected. But I'm still scared, because there is still a lot of anti-establishment populist energy out there. And frankly, I think it's rather revealing that a lot of, people on the far left spend more time attacking Joe Biden for his cabinet picks than they do attacking Donald Trump for literally attempting to destroy our democracy. Right? I think that maybe their priorities are a little screwed up. So I'm worried about the fact that there are a lot of people who are still radicalized and still unreasonable. And I do think that, one of the reasons we need something like a UBI is to help people, feel invested in and committed to and believing in our system again and feeling included, right? It's an important, it's a part of de-radicalizing them, but it's not going to do it by itself. We also need to, frankly, actually, we're not going to get a UBI until we work out some of our differences. We need to stop demonizing one another. We need to stop, believing in kooky conspiracy theories, whether they're far left or all right ones, or the occasional centrist one. We need to stop believing in that stuff. We need to return to believing in reality, because then if we're all in a shared reality where we're getting our sources of information from credible sources, not just from partisan ones or ideological ones, then we have a chance to work together to pass this UBI.
Yeah.
It would probably help to de-radicalize, but sadly, I think the de-radicalization might actually have to come first, because without that, you're just going to have more partisan warfare in Congress and nothing will get done.
That's a chicken and an egg scenario to me. I don't see the radicalization ever going away without, because again,
not completely, but it may be just enough. Maybe just enough that we can, get a Democratic majority in there, pass this bill, right? To work with the right kind of Republican majority, but nobody in the Republican Party is talking about that right now. I would love, if somebody was to run on, I have my own more right-wing version of Andrew Yang's freedom dividend that you can see on MovingForwardPod.com. Go to MovingForwardPod.com, click on policy, and you'll see that I have taken Andrew Yang's approach of UBI and I've applied it to things like healthcare and education as well. And that is actually a policy platform that a new kind of GOP could back. So if I saw somebody running on something like that in the GOP primary, I would register as a Republican. I'd vote for them. And if we could get both parties, if the debate was about what kind of UBI are we going to have rather than whether or not to have one, that would be progress. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I truly think that the greatest threat facing not just our country, but civilization in general right now is radicalized groups who are hostile to liberal democracy.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I'm a bit more pessimistic just because I do see these food lines miles long, thousands of people.
It's heartbreaking.
That is a breeding ground for radicalism. People are much more prone to become radical during times of action like this. The last time we saw poverty like this was at the Great Depression, and FDR had to come in and enact a really progressive, borderline socialist policies in order to quell the kind of discontent that was brewing. And
a lot of people do, a lot of right wingers don't give FDR credit for the fact that he basically
saved
capitalism. That's what he did. Again, that would not be my default position. I think Social Security is kind of it's problematic. That's putting it lightly. I kind of hate Social Security because, for one thing, payroll taxes are the most regressive kind of tax that there is. It's literally working poor people pay more than rich people in payroll taxes as a percent of their income. That's really super fucked up, right?
And as a funding mechanism, it's deeply flawed given the nature of automation coming down the road. Exactly. It's going to run out of money eventually just by the nature of how it's funded.
Although that you can't really blame FDR for that, because that was the world has changed a lot since then.
Right.
But like I said, this was a situation where liberals had to compromise with socialists to create these social liberal or social democratic center-left compromises that kind of define our mixed economy, not just in the US, but all over the civilized world. There was a period where we were trying actual far-left communism, and we were also simultaneously trying out this social liberal compromise. And every place that tried far-left communism became a hellhole. And every place that did the social liberal compromise has actually done not just comparatively well, but the most peaceful, prosperous societies ever in the human race happened as a consequence of that. Of course, there's still lots of room for improvement, and there's no guarantee that it'll last forever. But yeah, that was a situation where we had to compromise, and democracy functioned how it's supposed to.
Yeah. Agreed. So, hopefully Biden's administration can come with something like that. And I think if you see criticism from the left about his cabinet choices and things of that nature, it's because they're concerned that he won't do what is necessary within his power. But again, we both agree that that's premature discussion up until we see what happens in Georgia. So, hey, if you're listening to this right now, do whatever you can.
Yeah, frankly, like it doesn't even matter what Joe Biden wants to do.
Yeah.
If Mitch McConnell maintains control of the Senate, it won't make any difference.
Yes.
It won't matter. So, by all means, criticize him once the Democrats have the power to do something. But up until then, like focusing your anger on Joe Biden is misplaced. Should be focusing it on McConnell, frankly.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of where I am right now.
I'm getting that son of a bitch out by voting for Democrats in Georgia. Just do 100%. It. Donate money to the Democrats in Georgia. Do whatever you can. Phone bank, whatever you can do.
Really quick before we go, what do you think about this crazy idea that the left keeps on trying to push about not seating these 104 GOP House members that voted or that joined in on this litigation in Texas? Just Pelosi not seating them because that's a seditious act.
I mean, frankly, it's a perfectly morally justified one and an act of patriotism, as far as I'm concerned. The bigger question that's more cynical is it smart political strategy? And probably not. I mean, Joe Biden needs to heal this country. We need to move past Trump, right? And that means we need to give people a chance to escape the cult. I think that actions that further radicalize his cult might not be wise, even if they would be totally justified morally.
Yeah,
so
that
I'm
action,
kind of agnostic about it.
That would set off the Civil War.
On the one hand, I think it's justified, but on the other hand, I think she probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I feel like I know that the GOP would do it without a doubt.
Oh, absolutely, they would. Yeah. But it, two wrongs don't make a right, as they say. And when one party starts cheating and the other party says, well, they're cheating anyway, so we might as well cheat too. Not that this is cheating, of course. In this case, I think that is justified and fine. But there are people who are calling for the Democrats should basically do their own seditious acts or whatever. And I don't think that's good. I think we need to bring the country together and heal the divisions. Don't get me wrong. I am not one of those people who's like just, oh, the poor Trump voters, they don't know what they're doing. They just need a nice hug. Like I'm not like that at all. I really, really dislike these people, like to the point where they destroyed my party. Like I fucking hate them,
Yeah.
So that's not where I'm coming from. But I'm just saying, like, as much as we might want to punish them for it, we have to ask ourselves if that's the smartest way to solve the problem in this country, or if it's just going to make it worse.
I think you and I both agree. We both agree. All right. Is it going to be you or me who says it today?
You should say it.
All right. Well, this has been the Moving Forward podcast. I have been so happy to join along again. And Andrew Yang is and forever will be my gumbo.
Yes. Andrew Yang is our taco and Moving Forward is our gumbo.
Oh, yeah. Hey, really quick before I go out, can I plug something?
Uh-huh.
I am going to be planning on doing a Twitch stream charity fundraising, hopefully for the Humanity Forward Fund. There are a lot of people who are in need this Christmas, and for my followers, I know I have not been active lately, just because I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a bit too pessimistic to really make content that I think is going to be productive in any way. But hopefully I can maybe make some monetary goals that can, boost some charity donations towards the Humanity Forward movement and maybe help out some people in need this Christmas season. So if you might be interested in that, be sure to check out my Twitter account. I'll be updating with my Twitch account. It's going to be Divvy the Wise, DIVITHE. WISE, no spaces or anything like that. We're going to be playing some Dark Souls games, some Bloodborne games, things of that nature. I might try and just start doing that there because I'm so tired of sitting around and not knowing what I can do to help people, and this seems to be something that might be in my capacity. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check it out. Thanks so much for the platform, Rio.
Of course. Thanks for coming on, Seth. And I'm sorry you're feeling down, but I think this was actually a very cathartic conversation. I'm glad we had it.
Good,
right.
Good. Hopefully
Cheers.
so. Cheers, man. I'm going to stick around for my chat, so don't go anywhere if you're still here. I'll catch up with you later, Rio. All right. So thank you guys again so much for joining along here. I see that there's been a lot of conversation happening in the chat, so I wanted to maybe join in and make sure that I didn't miss anyone who wanted to have something said. Let me just take a quick look here. I hope all of you guys are having a wonderful night here. I see that we've got someone being a bit provocative in the chat by the name of Poop Stain. It's hard not to gain eyes when you've got a name like that. Let's just take a look, and I'm going to scroll up a bit here and see. Look at what's going on. You literally have communist kids trying to destroy the cops. Imagine giving all the kids $1,000. They would have no drive to do anything. They would get bored and join Antifa. That's very provocative. That is a very provocative thing to say. Indeed, $1,000 would help people choose to, become more active in their community. And we've seen that in studies, specifically in the Appalachian Cherokee community. The $1,000 let students stay in school longer. They didn't leave school, so they had a better education, and they were much more likely when they came of age to join in community engagement. They were able to go and vote. They were able to be more engaged with town halls and things of that nature. So if you see people being more and more radicalized to head out to the streets, it's because they feel that they have no power to change their surroundings themselves through democratic voices. And actually, we've seen through data, empirical evidence, that the UBI would do the opposite of what you suggest. Mike Tubbs was a terrible mayor, and he only gave it to 100 people, not exactly UBI. So yeah, Michael Tubbs, mayor of Compton, California, was not reelected. And yes, again, we saw in Alaska that the governor who came in and touched the Alaska Permanent Fund was kicked out the moment that he did it. And the big distinction there is that everyone saw the Alaskan Permanent Fund. You don't touch that because everyone sees the effect of it. In Compton, only a handful, I think about 500 people, saw the money. So really, in that sense, it's not much different than any other welfare program because the universality aspect of it is not there. So you can't necessarily point to that as some sort of empirical evidence to show that it didn't work, when in fact the individuals that were receiving that universal basic income had their lives dramatically changed. Indeed, I wish that he could have given it to the entire Stockton community, but unfortunately that's not how city funding works, and that goes back to my concerns about Andrew Yang running for president in New York City. Let me just take a look here. What is going on? UBI makes people independent. That's what Dems hate because they want to continue to grow the government. That's from Chris Baker. I do kind of agree. There seems to be some concerted effort to stop a universal basic income from even being spoken about by the establishment Democrats, and I think it is because there is some amount of control that occurs from our existing means-tested welfare programs. Maybe some would get bored and join Antifa, but I think most would spend the money and grow the economy. That goes back to what I was saying, is if you really want people to have an engagement in their community and locally, then you give them the resources to do so. And when you take those resources out of their hands, then yeah, you should not be surprised when they resort to more violent means to try and have their voices heard. Poopstain also says, but I think the mentality of the actual people in America today, UBI would destroy America and its drive to succeed. This is a very provocative thing to say, and I do have to wonder why we see the most successful entrepreneurs are people who have their own basic income. You might call it the basic income of mom and pop. Bill Gates started Microsoft from his garage, but he had extremely wealthy parents, and hell, he had a garage to work in. In fact, the drive to succeed comes from a surrounding and place where you know that you're able to fail and not hit rock bottom and enter into an endless cycle of poverty. A drive to succeed is fostered by the ability to take risks and lose. That's what entrepreneurs do. And we have to remove this vicious cycle of poverty. I also think it's a little wrong to imagine that the drive to succeed is so important in an age in which automation is continually disrupting the economy. The fourth industrial revolution is going to be defined by artificial intelligence, robotics, globalization. These are just going to be facts of the economy. Just as the facts of the economy today are that the top 5 industries in the Fortune 500, you can just see FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. All of these are tens of times more powerful, more wealthy, more successful than the titans of industries during the robber baron days. They employ far fewer people than those industries too. More work is able to be done with less people. Facebook is a media company, but it actually doesn't make any media. We are the media. We are the employees in one way or another. So this drive to succeed is another relic of an antiquated puritanical work ethic obsession, where you believe that the only the sweat of your brow has to be these predefined ideas of what labor is, when these days labor is a digital commodity. Labor is attention. Labor is making a post on Facebook and not getting rewarded for it at all. Labor is interacting with my community and me benefiting off of the fact that you're making a comment on my video. I'm communicating with you. I'm actually making content that people are listening to right now. You provided your labor to me, my friend, and I think that you should be compensated for doing so. And so thank you for joining along with my channel. We disagree. UBI isn't paying people to do nothing. It's paying people to do anything. That is exactly, I couldn't say it any better. 420, take a rip. I don't want to get demonetized. Yeah, join Antifa and create distraction. The DOJ in states doesn't prosecute crime. I do think, there's some issues in how there are certain people who are more prone to be ticketed on the street, for instance. An Uber driver who receives a ticket and they can lose their day's wage, but at the same time, you don't see the homelessness crisis being dealt with in any way. Now, I don't think that the solution to homelessness is to criminalize it, but I do think that there are ways in which people who are just trying to live a life and get by are treated a bit unfairly by the way that we prosecute crimes and don't prosecute crimes. We don't have to disagree on that. I'm not sure if you're serious or being a troll. My bet is on troll, but I think that, maybe not completely. Hoopstain, we have to reshape society, and anyone you call Antifa is likely on the same boat. Let's not throw stones from glass house now. I have to agree with that statement for sure. I used to listen 100% to far-left MSM and independent outlets. I am telling you from 2 years of constant experience, they are liars with an agenda to manipulate people. Trust in the mainstream media is at multi-decades low, and I think that there's a good reason for that. But you can acknowledge that the mainstream media, the establishment media, is propaganda and possibly works to fulfill an agenda, but that still doesn't make you that doesn't make the case that Breitbart News is any more credible than the mainstream media. That's the logic there doesn't quite follow. But I do have to agree with you. There are many ways in which mainstream media is the reason that we've winded ourselves up into this post-truth era that we find ourselves in. We desperately need to be able to reach a world in which we don't feel betrayed by the fourth estate, which is supposed to be designed for us. But I think many people understand that it's not. FDR didn't stop the depression, but he made it more bearable. I agree. We're getting UBI in the second quarter of 2021. Watch. I can only hope that you might be right. Currently, I'm a bit bearish on things, and I think that the best case scenario for how we might see a universal basic income is at this point is going to be through some unforeseen adoption of a cryptocurrency blockchain technology that is somehow able to provide a system of commerce between parties that uses a universal basic income. Hopefully I can get the Good Dollar organization to do a interview with me. I'm looking forward to possibly having that come down the road. In order to make people realize UBI's benefit, people have to first know that what it is to need it. We're experiencing that right now, so it is inevitable. Yeah, seeing how almost 80% of the country agrees that cash in Americans' hands is what we need right now. Of course, if you were to label it, hey, do you agree with the universal basic income, that number might shift, which is why I think it's more important than anything else just to have it done. And then at that point, we can draw the cognitive dissonance to, hey, don't you think that this is actually a great boon on the economy? We need to do more of it. And from that point, we can have a foundation to start with. We can at least know that 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 = 4, and a universal basic income is a boon to you and me. That's the type of truth that's needed to start from, and that's how we can work on it. All right, I'm going to just skip forward a little bit here. Let's see. Explaining UBI and automation to Bernie bros is impossible. I always get into an argument with them. That's from DRS Metal. That's the funny thing, right? The Marxist ideology actually does not have a very good, explanation or way to deal with automation. Automation is a difficult concept to grasp because it's labor theory, and it all comes down to the idea that it can really easily default back into the same puritanical work ethic that I criticize so often on my channel. I think Yang Gang creators have an honest will among them, but Bernie far-left creators have terrible agenda that radicalizes people to extremes. I know I used to be there, and the far-left will argue. If you saw some of my earlier videos around the time that Sam Cedar was making the most disingenuous arguments against Andrew Yang and just flat out lying about him. They were doing everything they could to dismantle the idea of a universal basic income, and there's some disingenuousness there. I think any party can fall into a state of being in that boat if they have the correct environment in which to do so. That doesn't make a lot of sense in the way that I said it, but for instance, after the election, it's been a lot easier to give a pass to some left-leaning commentators just because they're no longer commentating on the types of criticisms that you would have expected them to earlier in the primary season. I think we're going to see a resurgence of that as Biden gets inaugurated, and then the floodgates are going to open as they start to criticize his administration from there. Hell, like we already talked about in this episode, we're already seeing that happen. Antifa has huge funding anyways. They just make massive cash through fundraising. It's really interesting to hear this message spoken about, and I try to bring up the fact that a lot of right-leaning people have chosen Parler to go to, and they completely disregard the fact that the Mercer family, Rebecca and Robert Mercer, are basically the flag bearers of that entire movement. They were behind Cambridge Analytica. It's very interesting to see a group of people who create the boogeyman of George Soros and being the puppet master of the entire world order, but they completely neglect the fact that there are right-leaning billionaires that are also in the game to change global geo-global politics. I think it's a little bit bizarre that this media narration has taken hold amongst the right, that Antifa is some highly funded by. Antifa is a social movement at the end of the day. Even if you believe truly that there are some nefarious funding mechanisms behind it, which there's going to be fundings from all sorts of places, historically what's going to be spoken about in the textbooks. It's not going to be, George Soros created an entire fabricated social justice movement against police brutality. No, you're going to see that Black Lives Matter protesters took to the streets in 2020 during a global pandemic to fight for social justice rights. That's going to be what's written about in history. You need to start from that position, I think, moving forward, if you're thinking about the criticisms of the Black Lives Matter movement, because it's not going to work. It's going to fall short. I think the best thing that can be done in that situation, if you really truly believe that there's a nefarious funding mechanism behind it, is to agree, yes, the change needs to happen, and be there for the change, and be there at the negotiating table. But not just, create scarecrows and boogeymen. I don't think that's going to help anything whatsoever. I also don't really think that that's truly what's going on. But, everyone has a different version of reality these days, I think. So again, I wanted to just kind of plug here that I'm going to be a little bit more active on my Twitch account, I think, and I'm going to be less political over there just because I don't see how I'm really helping things in this moment right now. I'm going to see if I can do some fundraising. I've reached out to the Humanity Forward Twitter account to see if there's some way that I can do a donation ticker. I think the first goal is going to be about $50 or something to try and help some families who are in need right now. My stomach just falls into this deep pit of despair every time I see these pictures of people in these food lines at this time of year, and I don't know how I can help other than to maybe do something like that. So if you might be interested in video games like the Soulsborne genre and you want to tag along, head over to my Twitch account. It's going to be Divvy the Wise, DivIThewise. I'm going to be just kind of hanging out over there, doing some small talk. I might answer a political question here or there, or, but mostly philosophical things. I might try and just walk away a little bit from that kind of discussion because, oh man, there's only so much. There's just only so much. Keep in tune with this channel, though, if I do get the inspiration to create some videos. And I think it's just waiting until after about the 20th of January. That's going to be when I find the motivation to start actually. It's going to be criticism to the Biden administration, I'm sure. But until we figure out what's going on in Georgia, I just don't know what to say. There's nothing else to say. Go vote. Go vote in the way that you think is going to be the most important to create the change that you want to see in this country. And until then, it's a waiting game. There's nothing else to be said. You guys have been amazing. The people who have been subscribed and supporting this channel and being active in the chat, I really do appreciate it. Sorry if my tone gets a little combative there, but what can you do? You guys are awesome. Have a great night. Have a wonderful holidays with your family. Take some time outside. Make sure you're getting in as much vitamin D during the season as you can. Look at some green wherever you might find it. You guys are awesome. Keep in touch. I'll be back soon. Bye, guys.